Zeus noticed it the way kings notice things. Not through evidence, but through the violation of a pattern so deeply internalized that its disruption registers before the mind has language for what changed. The sky was correct. That is what made it unsettling. Every constellation in its position, every wind running its established course, the cosmic balance holding to its established measure without detectable deviation. He would have found it. Zeus is the most attentive surveyor of the sky's architecture that has ever existed, because he built that architecture and has maintained it through every challenge it has absorbed across the full span of his reign. If something were visibly wrong, he would have found it within hours. Nothing was visibly wrong, and yet. The sensation is difficult to describe to those who have not governed something long enough for its rhythms to become indistinguishable from their own pulse. When you have maintained a system across centuries, the system becomes an extension of your awareness. You do not monitor it consciously any more than you consciously regulate your own breathing. You simply know when the pattern holds, and when it has, somewhere beneath the visible layer of things, shifted. Something had shifted, not in the sky. The sky was demonstrably correct. Somewhere beneath the sky, in the layer between what can be observed and what can only be felt by a god old enough to feel it, something had moved. Quietly, without announcement, without any of the signatures that accompany the kinds of disruption Zeus has spent his reign identifying and addressing. He stood at the edge of Olympus and looked at the world below him for a long time. He considered the possibilities with the systematic patience that has always been his most underestimated quality. The assumption of Olympus, and of the world beneath it, is that Zeus rules through force, through lightning and declaration, and the overwhelming response to identified threats. This is not wrong, but it is incomplete. What has sustained his rule through challenges that force alone could not have resolved is the quality of his attention. He thinks before he acts. He maps before he moves. He has survived not only because he is powerful, but because he is careful. And the two qualities together produce something that neither produces alone. There was no rebellion. He was certain of this. Rebellion has a particular texture, a gathering of intention that becomes detectable when it reaches a threshold of commitment. He had felt it before the Titan War's final phase, had felt it on the 3 occasions since when minor gods had organized grievances into something that required addressing. This was not that. There was no cosmic imbalance. The system he had built to monitor the structural health of the world's arrangement, life, death, sea, sky, the great interlocking mechanisms of existence, was reporting correctly on every measure. Whatever had shifted was not large enough to register as imbalance. It was too small for the instruments and too present to be dismissed. There was no visible disturbance in Olympus. The gods moved through their days with the same patterns they always had. Poseidon had been no louder than usual. The minor Olympians were doing what minor Olympians do. Nothing had been said in council that carried the weight of something being prepared. Nothing had been left unsaid in a way that felt like concealment, rather than simply unexpressed. Everything was normal. The feeling remained. He called Hermes with a specific quality of restraint. That means Zeus has not yet decided what he is looking for, and does not want the investigation to precede the understanding. Hermes is the right instrument for this kind of work. He moves between realms with a naturalness that draws no attention, and he carries information back without distorting it with his own conclusions, which is a rarer quality than it sounds. Most gods who observe also interpret. Hermes reports. The interpretation with Zeus is always reserved for Zeus. The instructions were careful. Quiet observation, the underworld, the sea, the behavior of the Olympians in their unguarded hours. No accusations, no announced purpose. He was not looking for evidence of a specific thing. He was looking for the texture of conditions, and he wanted the texture reported accurately, without the shape of a predetermined question imposed on what was found. Hermes descended. I was aware of his arrival before he announced himself. The underworld carries information about its visitors the way its rivers carry sediment, and I have learned to read arrivals the way I read the dead. I received him correctly. I showed him what there was to show: the passage halls, the river crossings, the warden stations, the operation of the intake system, the orderly movement of souls through the processes I have maintained without interruption for the entirety of my reign. I answered his questions with the patience of a king who has nothing to conceal from a messenger performing a routine diplomatic assessment. He found nothing. I want to be precise about this. He found nothing because there was nothing findable, not because I had hidden anything, but because what had changed between Athena and myself was not the kind of thing that leaves evidence. We had exchanged impressions in an ancient medium, stood at a boundary for a conversation measured in minutes, and reached an understanding that had no physical location, and no formal structure, and no documented existence anywhere in the cosmos. There was no conspiracy to discover. There was only an understanding between two gods who had both, independently, been watching the same things for a long time, and had finally looked at each other across a boundary and acknowledged it. Hermes left satisfied, or appeared satisfied. I noted, as he departed, a brief pause at the threshold, a moment held a fraction longer than transition requires, as though he were giving the air one additional opportunity to tell him something. He is more sensitive than Zeus credits, but sensitivity is not the same as knowing what you are sensing, and he left with nothing he could name. Zeus spoke with Athena that evening. I know the shape of this conversation, not from presence, but from understanding the two minds involved, and the situation that had produced the need for it. Zeus would have raised the topic carefully, not as a concern. Zeus does not easily admit concerns to his council, because admission shapes the counsel he receives, but as an intellectual question, something in the cosmic texture. Had she noticed anything? Athena had noticed everything. She said, "Stability in Olympus has always depended on patience. The architecture of order is not maintained through constant intervention, but through the establishment of patterns so durable that disruption becomes self-evidently costly to those who might consider it." The feeling Zeus was describing, she took his description seriously, because dismissing it would have been both incorrect and suspicious, was perhaps the natural sensitivity of a god who has governed for a very long time. The system was not a machine. It had its own rhythms. Those rhythms shifted on timescales too long for moment-to-moment monitoring to capture. This was not, she suggested, necessarily a signal of threat. It might simply be the world adjusting to changes that were not themselves problematic. The natural settling of a cosmos that had been through significant disruption and was finding a new equilibrium. Nothing she said was untrue, not a single word. And Zeus, who is brilliant, who would have detected a lie from Athena as quickly as he would have detected any other structural anomaly in his domain, found nothing to dispute. Because there was nothing to dispute. Because she had told him something that was accurate, useful, and completely empty of what she actually knew. That is a more sophisticated instrument than lying. It is the truth deployed as concealment, which works precisely because the listener's defenses lower in the presence of what they recognize as genuine. He would have left that conversation slightly reassured. The feeling would have returned by morning. I watched all of this from below, not with satisfaction. Satisfaction is a feeling that belongs to the completion of a thing, and nothing has been completed. With the particular quality of attention I have been cultivating since the lots were drawn, patient, comprehensive, without the distortion of urgency. I watched and I understood, with increasing clarity, the shape of the structure I was beginning to work within. Zeus is a centralized system. Every element of his authority runs through him, not because he has been careless in constructing it, but because centralization was the right design for the challenges he has faced. A singular ruler responding to singular threats with overwhelming focused attention. It has worked. It has worked extraordinarily well. The evidence is the length of his reign and the stability of the world he governs. Centralization has a cost that only becomes visible under specific conditions. It cannot process everything simultaneously. It was never designed to. When the threats are singular and identifiable, this is not a weakness. The singular response is faster and more overwhelming than any distributed system could manage. But when the information arriving at the center becomes ambiguous, when the sources are multiple, and the connections between them are invisible, and the pattern refuses to resolve into something that can be named and addressed, the system does not perform well. It was not built for that. It has never needed to be. It would need to be now. Zeus stood at the edge of Olympus and looked at the sky again. Everything correct, every star in position, every wind on its established course, the cosmic balance holding to its established me, azure, reporting normally on every available instrument. The feeling remained. He was right to feel it. I want to acknowledge that. He is too good a ruler to be deceived by surface appearances forever, and the instinct that was disturbing him was accurate. Something had changed. The world was not what it had been before Athena stood at the boundary of my realm and placed a frame around a shared understanding. The difference was that what had changed left nothing to find. He was looking for the source of a river that ran entirely underground, in channels cut through stone over long years, fed by tributaries too dispersed to trace from any single vantage point. He would look at the surface and find it undisturbed. He would look at the sky and find it correct. He would not look at the empty space between two gods who had stood at a border and said very little, and understood everything. The game between us had entered a new phase, not a phase of movement, not yet. The next phase was simpler, more durable, and more difficult to defend against than anything force produces. The phase of letting him feel that something was changing without ever showing him what.